Every woman is insecure. Use that against her. She just wants self-validation. Ask her about her day. The answer doesn't matter. Feign interest. Stimulate her with questions. In the end, she just wants to be heard. Analyze what she likes most about herself and use a strategic compliment as an anchor. Open doors and always feign sincerity. Many people are seen, but few are seen. She just wants to be accepted as a woman, desired, understood, and have her full depth appreciated. Importantly, you only pursue what you know. In this video, you'll deeply understand female insecurity and how to leverage it to your advantage. But be warned, you're going to feel uncomfortable. Because what we're about to expose here challenges everything you've been taught about conquest, romance, charisma, and masculine value. It will require you to abandon logic and enter more dangerous territory. The realm of instinct, intuition, and raw emotion. But let's get to the point. Imagine this scenario. She laughs loudly, posts selfies with punchy phrases, flaunts meticulously crafted curves. Her feed reads like a gallery of power, dominance, and freedom. But something is wrong. Very wrong. Behind that sharp gaze, there's a silent earthquake, an emotional breakdown she never confesses, but begs for someone to uncover. And that's exactly where most men fail. They see the woman, but don't see the wound. It's easy to be hypnotized by the surface, by the makeup, the sweet voice, the cool way she pretends not to care. But that's theater, and most men are spectators. The true seducer is the hidden scriptwriter. He understands that every woman, no matter how powerful she seems, carries an invisible abyss between what she shows and what she fears to be. And if you know how to dive into that abyss, you don't seduce, you captivate. You become the only one she can't erase from her mind, even when she tries. But before we continue, you need to understand a brutal truth. The modern woman is trained to appear self-confident, but not to be. And that's why female insecurity is the gateway that separates forgettable men from unforgettable ones. It's not physical. It's not money. It's her ability to look through the mirror and see what she hides from herself. Nietzsche said that what is done for love is always beyond good and evil. And that's exactly why seduction is dangerous. Because true love is born when you touch the part of her that no one else has dared to explore. And that part is made of pain, fear, guilt, abandonment, comparison, doubt. Do you want to master the game? Then learn. What attracts a woman most is not the compliment that extols, but the touch that reveals. The touch that says, I see you, even when you pretend to be in control. You can be funny, handsome, successful. But if you don't know how to access the hidden insecurity of the woman you desire, you'll be just another one. Because she's seen dozens like you. She's heard every phrase, laughed at every meme, and had empty conversations with men who only wanted to impress. What she's never had is someone who saw her where she hides most. And before anyone distorts this message, we're not talking about manipulation. We're talking about deep understanding. The emotional predator wants to exploit pain to win. The strategist wants to decode pain to connect. The difference lies in intention, and your intention must be clear. Master the art of emotional reading to create a bond so visceral that even she doesn't understand why you attract her so much. And this is the game few men play. Because it requires something rare. Presence, attention, psychology, and a kind of charisma you can't learn in the gym or through self-help. What you're about to learn in this video isn't seduction in the shallow sense. It's emotional mastery. You'll understand why the most confident women are actually the most fragile, why the brightest smiles hide devastating inner voices, and how to use this reality, this contradiction, to become the man no woman forgets. The man she seeks, even when she pretends she no longer wants him. A smile is a shield, the illusion of feminine self-confidence. Understand it this way. She enters the room like a silent hurricane, well-fitting clothes, rehearsed perfume, rhythmic walk. The other women watch her carefully, the men correct their posture. She smiles, not exaggeratedly but with almost surgical precision. Everything about her seems calculated. And that's precisely why few notice. This performance isn't an expression of self-confidence. It's a defense mechanism. The modern woman has learned to act confident not because she's strong, but because she's been trained not to show weakness. From an early age, she absorbs invisible codes. That vulnerability is weakness, that crying too much is drama, that needing someone is neediness. She's molded to be independent, emotionally shielded, and socially desirable. But the truth is, this armor is costly, and you, as a strategic man, need to learn to see the cracks before she realizes she's breaking down inside. This is where the game begins. Real seduction isn't in what she says, it's in what she avoids showing. And you only access this territory when you abandon superficial perception and begin to observe the micro gestures, the pauses, the contradictions in her speech. She says she hates games, but plays them better than everyone else. She says she doesn't meet anyone, but her mood changes when she doesn't get attention. She talks about freedom, but doesn't know how to be alone. These inconsistencies aren't random. They are symptoms of an insecurity that has learned to camouflage itself as empowerment. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard said, "We live in the age of simulation, where appearance replaces essence." Today's woman is the epitome of this thesis. She projects an image that masks her neediness. Her feed is an edited mirror of the life she'd like to live, not the life she feels. Every story, every angle, every funny caption is deep down an unconscious plea for validation. And the tragedy is that she herself believes in the persona she created, until she finds someone who sees beyond the script. That's where you come in. Because while most people react to her outward brilliance, praising, desiring, surrendering, the true seducer observes the patterns. He notices that her smile is always the same, that her glances are trained, that her energy shifts when she realizes she's lost control. He understands that her self-confidence is performative, not organic, that she's excellent at hiding it, but terrible at sustaining it. And this creates an unfair advantage for those who know how to read the signs. Think of Marilyn Monroe. The world saw a sex symbol, a flamboyant, almost mythical woman. But those who knew her closely knew the brutal truth. Marilyn was one of the most insecure and emotionally fragile women of her time. She lived between identity crises, chronic neediness, and fear of abandonment. And ironically, this instability made her even more fascinating, because the mystery of beauty fraught with pain is one of the most seductive forces of the collective unconscious. Monroe was desired not only for what she showed, but for what she hid. And this brings us to a central question. What makes a woman truly attractive is not her strength. It's the tension between what she displays and what she represses. A woman who appears perfect is boring. But a woman who alternates between brilliance and shadow, who displays control while simultaneously signaling inner chaos, that woman is mesmerizing. And understanding this tension is key to mastering the game of emotional seduction. But be careful. It's not about exploiting her pain. It's about recognizing that the theater of female self-confidence is a dance, and that only refined seducers know the right moment to lead. You shouldn't invade her fragility. You must create a space where she feels like revealing herself. This requires rhythm, understanding, patience, and a presence that doesn't judge, but also doesn't kneel. It's the balance between challenge and acceptance that opens the door. When you start acting like this, something changes in the dynamic. She, accustomed to men who melt before her beauty, begins to wonder why you look at her differently. Why don't you seem impressed? Why, instead of surrendering, do you decipher her? And in this doubt, interest is born. Because the man who understands is more dangerous than the man who desires. What he understands can shake her very structure. Not her body, but her ego. And when you touch the ego of an insecure woman, you enter a space few have ever been. Now let's get to a practical detail. Most of the women who exhibit the most self-confidence are, ironically, the most fragile. Why? Because it's insecurity that fuels perfectionism. It's the fear of not being enough that generates the obsession with image. It's the need for validation that generates the sarcastic captions, the provocative posts, the excessive filters. And you can easily recognize this. They're the ones who expose their bodies the most, but can't tolerate silence the least. They talk the most about empowerment, but fall apart the most when they don't get likes or attention from the man they want. Are you starting to notice now? What seems like strength is often a protection against an ancient fear. And fear, when properly interpreted, is the map of desire. She desires exactly what makes her feel alive, seen, validated. But since no one truly sees her, she is never satisfied. Until someone comes along who desires her, not because of her body, but because of the inner turmoil she hates within herself. And in that moment, attachment is born. Oscar Wilde wrote that women are made to be loved, not to be understood. But he was wrong. They desire to be understood more than anything, but without losing their mystery. The woman who seems unattainable actually screams silently to be read. She wants someone to look at her and say, "I know you're acting, and I'm here anyway." When this happens, she disarms, not obviously, but subtly. She begins to waver in her automatic responses, to lower her voice, to tell stories with open endings. She tests her emotional reading, and if you don't reciprocate, you lose access. But if you reciprocate, if you respond with a presence that combines firmness and curiosity, she begins to reveal herself. Piece by piece, until you become the only person in front of whom she can be herself, without masks. And this is where true seduction begins. Because when you're the only place where she can disarm, you become emotionally indispensable. Not because you're cute, not because you're successful, but because you've seen what no one else has. The wounded child behind the woman the world admires. And it's this connection that paves the way to the next level. Because if you now understand that her smile is a shield, you need to know what that shield is trying to protect. What is the pain? What is the emptiness? What is the trauma she's never spoken about but which guides all her emotional choices? That answer isn't in books, it's in your ability to observe. And now we get into this concept, the invisible hole, the silent pain she never confesses. She says it's okay. She always does. Even when she's crying alone in the bathroom. Even when she feels that lump in her throat after opening Instagram and seeing that he's viewed it but not responded. Even when she spends the entire night smiling at parties where no one really touches her. She learned early on that expressing her feelings is dangerous, that showing fragility is giving the other person a weapon. And so, over the years, she developed a subtle talent, appearing unattainable while tearing herself apart inside. This woman, who seems confident, funny, determined, carries an invisible hole inside her, a hollow space carved by rejections she pretends to have overcome, by silent comparisons that never stop echoing, by abandonments large and small that she still doesn't know how to name. We're not talking about drama, but about emotional structure, a psychic void that forms when a woman grows up without understanding her true value and spends her life searching in others for what she has lost. This pain, this absence, doesn't come by chance. In most cases, it begins early. A distant, absent, overly critical father figure, or sometimes too present, but emotionally inaccessible. Freud once said, "The emotional experience of the father is the basis of the model a woman will create for her future relationships." This means that if the first man in her life made her feel invisible, she will repeatedly connect with men who reinforce that same feeling. Not out of masochism, but because known trauma is more comfortable than unknown love. And then you understand why so many women call themselves strong and free, yet remain trapped in destructive cycles. It's because they aren't choosing men. They are unconsciously trying to resolve the absence of the first with others. This hole, this blind spot, disguises itself as independence. But in reality, it's just a sophisticated form of self-protection. And you, as a strategist, shouldn't judge this. You should learn to read it. Women who experience this kind of pain don't seek affection. They test affection. They'll challenge, provoke, feign disinterest, all to see if you'll stay. And most men's mistake is falling into the trap of logic, responding rationally to what's purely emotional. When she disappears, they press. When she responds coldly, they respond coldly. But the real strategy lies in listening to what's unsaid. It's in realizing that her coldness isn't rejection, it's defense. That her silence isn't contempt, it's fear. At this level, the game isn't about words, it's about reading. And what you need to read is the pain of not feeling good enough. The pain of being compared to her prettier sister. The pain of being betrayed by someone who promised to care. The pain of being chosen solely for her body. The pain of not being chosen. This pain takes many forms, but they all boil down to one thing. She doesn't truly believe she deserves to be loved completely. And as long as that's true, she'll continue sabotaging any real connection that arises. But there's a paradox. The more insecure she is, the more provocative she becomes. This happens because the ego tries to compensate for the pain with illusory superiority. That's why so many insecure women are arrogant, cold, and seemingly unshakable. It's the ego's shield saying, if I appear unattainable, no one can reject me. But this shield, like all shields, weighs heavily. And deep down, she hopes, desperately, that someone will remove it without breaking her insides. This is where your role comes in. And no, we're not talking about being the nice savior. That only reinforces the cycle of pain. We're talking about being the mirror. The man who looks at her so clearly that he forces her to see herself. But be careful, the mirror doesn't judge. It merely reflects. This means you need to be firm, but not harsh. Precise, but not invasive. Interested, but not needy. Present, but not too available. It's in this balance that true connection is born. And this is where ordinary men lose their way. They either try to win you over too quickly, or they pull away when they realize the emotional depth involved. A woman carrying pain needs time. Not to open up, but to trust. She needs to test your stability. She needs to know you won't run away when she breaks down. And she will break down, not with screams, but with details. She'll change her gaze, her voice waver, tell a story with a strange ending. It's in these moments that you need to show you see, without invading, without trying to fix it. Just showing that nothing she reveals will make you back down. And do you know what happens when you do this? She goes into an internal emotional meltdown. Because you don't live up to the script. Because she expected you to be enchanted by the mask, but you saw her without it. And this kind of exposure, for someone who has spent her entire life protecting herself, is simultaneously frightening and addictive. She feels fear, but also relief, because finally someone is seeing what she tries to hide. And if you think this is an exaggeration, remember, the greatest loneliness isn't being alone, it's being surrounded by people and not being understood. The insecure woman isn't alone, but she is isolated, and because of this, when she finds someone who reads her deeply, she can't forget. Because you weren't just another one. You were the first to see. Nietzsche said that man is the animal that needs to be understood. With women, this is even more intense, because besides being human, they have been socialized to hide, to camouflage desire, pain, fear, guilt. The insecure woman wants to be loved, but fears that if she's truly seen, she'll be abandoned. And that's why, even though she desires love, she sabotages it. Because deep down, she believes that being who she truly is won't be enough. Now, let's get surgical. How do you transform this pain into a point of connection? First, never minimize it. When she shares something, don't say, "This happens to everyone." That erases it. Instead, say, "I can feel how this affected you." Second, don't try to solve it. Men want solutions, women want presence. The best thing you can do is validate her, not with empty compliments, but with real attention. A steady gaze, a silence that doesn't pressure. A comment that shows you understood more than she said. Third, use stories, not advice. Women connect through narratives. When you share an experience of your own, not to compete, but to reveal yourself, you create an emotional space where she feels less alone. And that sense of belonging is gold. Because a woman who feels understood begins to let her guard down. And the one who lets her guard down surrenders, not with her body, but with her soul. And this brings us to the heart of this chapter. Every insecure woman is caught between two forces. On one side, the desire to be seen. On the other, the fear of being rejected when seen. She lives this conflict in silence. And you, as an emotional strategist, need to be the bridge. Not the psychologist, not the hero. The bridge. The space where she experiences for the first time the possibility of being loved even in the parts of herself she hates most. And this has a powerful side effect: gratitude. The woman who feels you saw something in her that even she didn't understand feels profound gratitude. And gratitude is the seed of emotional loyalty. She can fight it, she can resist, run away, deny it, but she will never be able to erase the memory of the moment she felt completely seen. And that moment belongs to you. And here lies the ultimate contradiction. The more pain she hides, the more intense the connection will be when she allows herself to be seen. Pain, when understood, becomes bond. Emptiness, when acknowledged, becomes presence. Insecurity, when embraced without judgment, becomes attachment. And this attachment isn't born from sex or from beauty. It's born from shared silence, from a respected pause, from a gaze that reads, from a presence that understands, from a man who doesn't try to heal her, but who remains even in the face of chaos. And now that you understand this, you're ready for the third level. Because seeing her emptiness is just the beginning. The next step is mastering the game of emotional tension. How to use this silent pain, not to control, but to seduce with precision. How to become the only one who makes her feel safe, precisely because you know she isn't. You've already understood that she hides her pain. You've learned to recognize the emptiness. Now comes the most delicate and most powerful move, turning the mirror. Not to reflect what she shows, but to amplify what she feels silently. And by doing so, you activate an irreversible process, desire. But not the physical, fleeting desire conditioned by appearance. We're talking about a deeper desire, one that merges with fascination, attachment, and emotional need. And it arises when you become the mirror that shows her not who she is, but who she wants to be and still can't. Most men try to attract by showing value. You, from now on, will attract by revealing vision. This means seeing in her not just the pain, but the hidden potential behind it. The insecure woman lives in conflict with her own identity. Part of her wants to be loved for who she is. The other part fears that if she shows who she is, she will be discarded. And in between, she oscillates. Sometimes seductive, sometimes cold, sometimes needy, sometimes indifferent. The average man gets lost in these signals. The strategist, on the other hand, navigates them. Because he understands that it's not about her rejecting him, it's about her rejecting her own vulnerability. And this is where the reverse mirror comes into play. You position yourself as someone who understands what she feels, but challenges her to grow beyond it. Not with advice, but with poise, with surgical phrases, with pointed validations. You say, you feel this way because you were shaped this way, but you can be more. And this phrase, said at the right moment, collapses her defenses. Because you are implicitly giving her something rare, permission to evolve without being judged, support without submitting, trust without dependence. This is where positive emotional dependence is born. A state in which she doesn't need you, but prefers you, in which you become the only man with whom she can let her guard down without feeling weak. And this is addictive, because relationships with men who only desire your body are common. But with someone who awakens the soul, it's unforgettable. But here's the detail that separates beginners from masters. You should never directly tell her she's insecure. It makes her recoil. The key is to mirror her emotion with elegance. When she makes a self-deprecating comment, you don't contradict her. You provoke reflection. Funny you think that way, because I see the opposite. And leave it hanging, without trying to convince, without lecturing, just planting doubt. Because where there is doubt, there is openness. And where there is openness, the seducer plants roots. And make no mistake, she will test you. She will try to invalidate your reading, she will play with your logic, she will provoke distance. But if you maintain your presence intact without being emotionally affected, you signal something she's never had. A man who reads her and stays. And that, for an emotionally unstable woman, is like a beacon in the midst of chaos. She anchors herself in your stability, not because you control her, but because you understand her. And it's in this understanding that you activate an internal reward cycle in her. Every time she's with you, she feels relief. Relief in not having to pretend. Relief in not being alone in her own head. Relief in being able to be intense without fear of pulling away. And this relief, repeated frequently, transforms into an emotional association. You become a trigger of safety, and paradoxically, of excitement. Because true excitement doesn't come from the unknown. It comes from the contrast between the known and the rare. And a man who understands is rare. Let's be strategic now. The mistake most men make when they spark this kind of connection is trying to trap the woman afterward. They try to force reciprocity. They rush the bond. They show neediness. The result? They break the mirror. Because an insecure woman can't stand feeling emotionally drained. The secret is to maintain balance. You offer connection, but gently. You validate, but with restraint. You make yourself available, but never predictable. This dance between intensity and mystery is what keeps desire alive. Remember, if you're always accessible, you become a resource. If you're always distant, you become an illusion. But if you're predictably unpredictable, that is, emotionally present but strategically rare, you become an enigma. And her unconscious will pursue you like someone trying to solve a code. And when the code is linked to her own value, she can't let go. That's why, when done masterfully, this tactic doesn't just generate desire. It generates emotional fidelity. Because you didn't just fill some need. You positioned yourself where no one dared, at the center of her insecurity. And there you built, with words, gestures, and silence, an emotional sanctuary. A safe place that only you represent. A space where she feels beautiful even when she's broken. Where she feels desired even when she's lacking in performance. Where she feels whole, even knowing she's made of parts. And all this without needing to say a single pretty phrase. No cliches, no cheap tricks. Just reading, patience, and sensitivity. Because that's what differentiates a true seducer from a manipulator. The former creates mirrors, the latter projects ghosts. And now you understand the mechanics. Insecurity isn't the obstacle, it's access. And you only need 3 skills to use this to your advantage. Observe without rushing, provoke without hurting, and remain without demanding. That's enough. Because an insecure woman doesn't surrender to those who admire her, but to those who understand her. And before I close, a warning. This is not a game for the weak. You'll deal with intense emotions, contradictory responses, disappearances, and reconnections. But if you know how to navigate this without getting lost, you'll access the most dangerous and most powerful place in a woman's mind. The place she herself fears to enter. Alone. And if you're the only one capable of entering there and remaining there with dignity, then no matter what happens next, she'll never forget you. Because you weren't a lover. You were a mirror. And mirrors that reveal what no one has ever seen don't break. They last forever.